I know some people don't understand it, but for me personally, it has just always, I mean, when you think about having a baby, you just envision it, having it vaginally. And that was just my dream. And just, I wanted to experience that and have that be part of at least one of my birth stories.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning into this episode of Mom Talks with Krista. Today I have Kara Swanson, who is the founder of Life Well Lived. She creates gluten-free and clean eating recipes over on her website. But today she's talking all about her journey to have a VBAC after 2 C-sections. She had many doctors that told her no, but she did her research and she persisted and found that she was able to get what she wanted to. So check out this episode. I have 2 parts. Here's part 1. Can't wait to see what you think. And just start by telling us a little bit about you, your background, family, and what you do.
So I'm Kara Swanson. I have a blogger over at Life Well Lived. It's kind of my nutrition company business. I share a bunch of recipes, gluten-free recipes, healthier, swaps and things like that, nutrition tips. I am married almost 9 years this month, so that's fun. And then I have 3 kids. London is 7, Eiley is 4, and Shepherd is 10 months. So they keep me busy. My husband and I both work from home. We both own our own businesses. So it's a little crazy, but it's fun and it kind of works for our family.
Yeah. So the reason I wanted to invite you on the show is because like we were just talking about before I started recording was, that we met a couple of years ago at a Jenna Kutcher event, which anyone that hasn't heard of Jenna Kutcher, they should definitely look her up because she's awesome.
Yeah.
And then I was scrolling and I saw your story about how you had 2 C-sections, so with your 2 daughters, and you were really committed and really wanted to have a VBAC. So you kind of shared your story. So to backtrack a little bit, so with your C-sections, were these something that were planned, or how did these kind of come about in your birth story with your daughters?
So my first one was with London almost 7 years ago, and that was not planned at all. I went in wanting a natural birth, but I was also naive to what birth was like and just how to I wasn't mentally prepared either, but I just wasn't progressing in my labor. And I didn't even know either how to use my voice really then, what I know now. And I just didn't even know the things to ask or look for, or, questions to ask my doctor. They said, it could be, and her heart rate was going down too with some contractions. So they said, we can wait a little bit longer, but then it would be an emergency if, she didn't come out within a certain amount of time. So we just decided, okay, let's just go ahead and do it as calmly as possible. So we had the C-section. She ended up having the umbilical cord wrapped around her neck 3 times. They did say that if I would have had her vaginally, she probably wouldn't have survived. So I feel completely at peace with that C-section, even though it was actually more traumatic. Just with her, they had to whisk her off and make sure she was okay. And then I got an infection and was hospitalized afterwards. And so that one was it was traumatic. And so my next, when I got pregnant again with my second daughter, I was like, okay, I want a VBAC. I do not want to experience that C-section again. I actually had a different doctor because we had moved to a different state, and I told them about my desire to have a VBAC, and they said, okay, that's fine. But at each appointment I was kind of and we're on course to have a VBAC, right? We can do this. And they're like, yeah, some doctors, you kind of at that practice, you had to see different doctors. Different doctors would kind of say different things. Some of them would be more encouraging than others, but more often I left just discouraged and they really weren't supporting my dream of having a VBAC. But again, even 4 years ago, I didn't know that I had a voice, and I didn't know what questions or where to go to get the information that I needed, or that I could even go to a different doctor. And had I known that, I would have done things differently. We were still kind of on course to have a VBAC. And then my last week, because they would only let me go, I think a week past my due date, and they said they would not induce me or anything like that. They said, we're going to schedule the C-section because I wasn't dilated, I wasn't progressing or anything. They weren't going to give me any more time. So that was really emotional, knowing that I felt like I didn't have a choice or any other options. So that one was scheduled. But I will say that it was a lot more peaceful, and like I still got to let the blood pulse, the umbilical cord, delayed the cutting of the cord. I got to do the skin to skin. So I knew that I could ask for those certain things. Again, more at peace with that, but it was still hard. And I knew with my next pregnancy that I was going to do everything that I knew that I could. And I researched a lot and did a lot more fighting for myself and advocating for myself with my third one.
Awesome. Yeah. Actually, I was going to like lead into my next point about what kind of then changed between, your second daughter and your son. And it sounds like the research and really just like the power behind it, knowing like I really want this.
Yeah. Yeah. It was just a VBAC and natural birth is just, I know some people don't understand it, but for me personally, it has just always, when you think about having a baby, you just envision it, having it vaginally. And that was just my dream. And just, I wanted to experience that and have that be part of at least one of my birth stories. And so, yeah, when I found out that I was pregnant with Shepherd, I immediately hopped on the phone. I called all the different OBGYNs and said, hey, I want to have a VBAC. And at first they were like, sure. And then I was like, well, after 2 C-sections. And they were like, well, no, we don't do that. And I was like, no, no one in your office will make an exception. And they said no. And I called, I don't even know how many. And I kept getting no's. And I called a midwife. I knew that they probably wouldn't take me, but I just called anyways. And I'm glad I did, because she was like, we can't take you, no one in the Des Moines area where I live, no one will do a VBAC after 2 C-sections. That's just kind of a policy that they have. They said, but in Iowa City, which is 2 hours away, they said that they do them. And I said, okay. So I hopped off the phone and I immediately called Iowa City, got a hold of a nurse, and she was just like, yeah, we do them all the time. Like, act like it was like no big deal. And I was just like, this is my place. Like, I am going there. And so that was really encouraging. And finally I felt like, okay, like some hope, that this was actually going to happen.
That's awesome. That is like real, like determination. I think that's so good for everyone to hear, is because so many moms, I think, would have either given up or felt like, oh, well, if, these 5 places don't do it, then it's just fine. I shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
But I think it's awesome that you went with your initial goal and instinct that this is what I want to do.
Yeah. And I even said that too. Yeah. I said that to the midwife. I was like, when she told me, I was like, oh, she was like, honestly, she was so encouraging. And she was like, she's like, if it's important to you, she's like, you do it. And she was just like, it's not that big of a deal to drive 2 hours. She's like, people drive to a midwife, you know what I mean? People drive here to see me, she's like, it's worth it if it's something that you want. And so that was just super encouraging to me to be like, okay, like this isn't crazy to drive, just 2 hours one way. Yeah. So that was really encouraging to hear from her.
That's awesome. So once you kind of found out in Iowa City that there was doctors there that would do a VBAC after 2 C-sections, so how did you go about then finding your specific doctor, and kind of what told you that this was the right choice with your doctor?
So I think I got super lucky in the fact that I just called and I said, I want to make an appointment, and they put me with a doctor, Dr. Schaefer. And so she was my first doctor, and I immediately knew she was my doctor. She was like, listen to me. She was so encouraging. I had the option to kind of see if I wanted a different doctor, but my husband was with me, and we were both just like, no, like this is the doctor for us. So yeah, I just fell in love with her right away. I'm like, I want another baby just so I can see her again. She's incredible.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. So then I'm sure by that point you were like, this was meant to be, like this, I need to do this. So you kind of mentioned calling a midwife at first. Did you end up having a midwife or a doula part of your procedure at all?
I didn't. I thought about maybe having a midwife. I even called a couple and just toyed with the idea, but when it came down to it, we just kind of felt like we didn't need one as much. But during labor, I was like, I wish I would have had one, but it worked out. It worked out completely fine in how it should, how it was meant to be. But yeah. I can see now the benefit of having one for sure.
Awesome. And so you kind of mentioned you did a lot more research this time around. So is there anything else you had to do to kind of prepare for it differently?
or different things that maybe your doctor like told you that was different this time around because of, you know, having two C-sections prior?
I didn't do anything necessarily specific to prepare for the VBAC. I think it's super important, like, to be staying healthy, you know, like with nutrition and exercise, because I know that's just good for you anyways, but just so that your body is prepared, and also for recovery, it's going to help. I did a lot of like mindset stuff, I guess, and just visualizing having like the birth that I wanted, and also just staying positive, especially the last couple weeks of my pregnancy were like super, super hard. I got super sick. And so I just had to work a lot on like my mindset with it, and, you know, not listening to the lies and the fears that were trying to come in, and just trying to stay positive.
Kind of like while you were going through this, did you have any doubts, or were you really good about kind of like blocking those doubts out and just keeping a positive mindset?
No, I had a lot of doubts. And I wasn't fearful ever. So a lot of times why doctors won't take VBAC patients, and especially they're nervous about the VBAC after 2, is that uterine ruption. And it's so scary, obviously, if that happens, but it's actually really, really quite low for it to actually happen. The percentage is like 0.02%. And so it's super low. And there's also things like, I would talk to my doctor, you know, there's things that they can see that would lead up to it. So she was like, we'll be monitoring you the whole entire time to see if we see any of those markers, you know, that might happen. So that I felt completely at peace about. It was just, I was honestly more fearful about the actual C-section itself, and just not getting to have a birth, because in my mind, I felt like this was kind of like my last chance, you know, to try for a VBAC. So that was more of what I struggled with, just wanting the actual VBAC and having that experience.
All right, that was part 1 of my interview with Kara Swanson. Hope you guys feel a little more empowered and wanting to stick up for yourself when you really want something. So next week I'm going to have part 2, and she's going to share more about her story and also offer some awesome advice to moms out there if you feel like you can't speak up and want to. So in the meantime, follow Kara at Kara Swanson on Instagram, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Mom Talks with Krista. If you're not yet subscribed, go ahead and click on the subscribe button. It should be down here somewhere. We release new episodes every single Wednesday, and if you're not following us yet, be sure to follow us at Mommy Knows Best on Instagram. And remember, if you're watching this and doubting yourself, you are a great mom. So thanks so much for watching, and we will see you next week.